What's the mission?
The mission. Let's get your arse in position. Don't ask questions, piss pot.
I live to serve.
Well, that's not very nice. Hi gamers, and welcome to an update of the much talked, many scorned and ultimately failed launch that was AC Unity. You may have seen my last video on the game for both consoles, and as I predicted, the last patch on the game, being the fourth one at the time, and it released just before Christmas, finalising that stability and performance of the game to a level that is perfectly playable, if not commendable or impressive across both machines. Check it out below if you can, complete with my frame rate analysis on both console versions. This brought the game into a near as damn it identical stance on both machines, and parity is restored, if you will. Now that was my final verdict on the console versions, but I've yet to pass my final verdict on the PC version. Now how does it fare? What do we get and how much improvement have we seen from these patches? Well, to make the process more balanced and my future analysis and head-to-heads far more encompassing, I have built another machine, one designed to show top-end or near as damn it PC performance, aside SLI and Crossfire rigs that is. But this is always a very hit and miss scenario anyway. My new rig is a Gigabyte Z97X gaming motherboard which houses my i5 4690K fully unlocked and clockable quad core, more than enough for any CPU and not be the bottleneck on any current games, or ones to come for a while at least. And this is paired with an MSI GTX 970 4GB, again a card that can be clocked if needed up to near 980 performance. So this machine certainly gives you the top level expected of a PC with its 16GB of Corsair RAM, SSD, and should not be a hindrance in my gaming tests. Along with this, I also have my tried and trusted Gigabyte board again with an 8-core AMD FX 8350 paired with a 2GB Radeon 7870, an SSD, and a 16GB of Corsair RAM again. This machine represents the medium range and is still a great gaming machine that on paper specs is more than a challenge for both consoles. But paper specs, as I always keep saying, never mean that much, and I try to avoid that chat as much as possible. So now we have the machines configured to show a good range of PC spec and more importantly both sides of the PC hardware fence. My AMD machine will show how each game performs on that, and my Intel Nvidia rig, being more powerful, will not only show the power split but also the hardware differences. I will have an AMD Intel video up soon on DX12, Windows 10 in my new Technobabble series that many will hopefully find interesting and explain a lot. And this video will give you a brief example as to how and why this plays out. So first up, both machines are patched up to version 4 and are fresh installs of Windows. But to give you a base, this is how the then PC version ran on my AMD rig when we launched. No matter if sub HD or not, maintaining a solid 30 was near on impossible. Hell, even a solid 15 was hard, and it mirrored the state of the game across all platforms, PC being the worst, then PS4, then Xbox One. None were great or impressive from that stance, and still are not, but Ubisoft should be commended for creating a game and a world that at least would not run on last-gen machines. Just the time to finish was the single biggest takeaway from it that they should learn. But that was then and this is now, and first let's see how the PC has improved. Just another note on this video is I no longer use Fraps or Afterburner to show frame rate info, as this was always just a guide and it isn't accurate at all as to how the frame rate will appear to you the player as you're using the machine. It takes it from the buffer of the GPU and it's the best case scenario, and it's not representative of what you actually see on screen. The method I use is FCAT, which instills a coloured bar on the video outlay to capture any tears on the screen. On top of that, I then use my own software analysis, not FCAT's version, to analyse the frame rate and break it down at half-second intervals just like I do on my console analysis. And that hopefully will be a video I'll get up to you soon to explain my whole testing methodology. Short version is, all my captures on PC have the same additional overhead that my console ones do. And that is none at all. I capture all my footage and always have done on a secondary machine to the one running the actual game. I don't use Fraps or any other software capture to this, but I use dedicated separate hardware and raw captures for frame rate analysis, which need big space and fast write access in my RAID array. But more detail can be found on my later video, as I say. Here you can see in the top right the frame rate as per Fraps view of the world, and below or above in white is the actual frame rate as being seen, experienced and displayed on screen to the player. And as you can see, it's showing much higher than what is actually being captured on screen, and this is a huge misguided fact that has long since been in place for gauging FPS on PC. My method now removes all of that and gets an accurate like-for-like comparison across hardware and platform to compare against. and here we can see the actual differences. You can see the difference can be 5, 10, or even more frames per second difference between both analysis, but the one that I'm doing is far more accurate and a representation of how you'll actually experience the game. It's irrelevant what the frame buffer generates, it's the actual output on screen, and that's the only thing that matters, not what's being rendered halfway through the engine. Enough methodology talk, let's get onto the facts, and here we can see that the PC performance has improved. Now my average rate is much nearer 30 on this setup, and to show that the game is not GPU bound, a drop to 900p as per consoles offers up pretty much zero to no tangible benefits whatsoever, confirming, if any are in doubt, that the PS4 version would most likely run the same as it does now if it was set to a native 1080. We are safe to say this game is CPU bound in the extreme, so we can learn from that. Well, CPU usage on this machine shows that we are in fact not hammering the cores at all, with big stalls evident on the CPU and in the game, and I'm pretty sure these are systemic of my first video on the game with very bad code that is tying itself in knots. What we are seeing is cache misses on data and syncing issues, see stalls, across the entire engine. You can see here as the cape and the physics engine keeps flapping even though you're walking down the road as if it's resetting, and this is affecting the GPU. You can see the percentage jumping from 60 to 90% just before and after this happens. You're obviously using GPU compute for the physics side, both PC and console versions, is affecting the AMD rig far more here, and this is most likely to do with the fact that again time was of the essence, and this is an Nvidia game, so they've had more time spent on the driver to optimize that side of the engine. With the Physics X being part of the GameWorks engine, this would have been taken care of by Nvidia in their black box solution. But this is also evident in the timescales, and here in the Assassin's Creed game, the additional tessellation options they were going to add into the game still haven't been released, and probably never will be by now, and Ubisoft have probably given Nvidia a refund on that deal. But these coding issues are in the game, and some of these will be so deep, as I said before, that could never be resolved in the 4 weeks or so window from launch for all the patches. I'm sure there have been many gains in the engine since then, and we will see a lot of these and more in Victory this year. But here and now we have a game that performs horribly on a machine that runs other games like Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes or Advanced Warfare easily at 60 FPS at equal to console settings. The machine here is not the issue. Well, not in and of itself anyway. Now on the 970 and the i5 4690 machine, we can see a far more impressive showing, but this machine is far more powerful. The i5 4690 is certainly a good enough CPU to not be the issue, like I say, in many games, and probably the i7 is more of an overkill. This is certainly not the bottleneck here, and on the full settings we're getting around 45 frames per second, but it's not dipping and juddering like it does on my AMD machine. If we drop the shadows down to high and the geometry from ultra to very high, then 60 is pretty much locked thereabouts. You could drop to 900, but what would be the point of the PC version? My Nvidia machine is certainly the way it's meant to be played in this particular instance. It runs this game around 50-60% better than my AMD machine, and that makes a difference even at higher settings. Bear in mind, on my AMD machine I'm running the textures at low, because anything higher than that seems to exasperate the juddering even more, and it helps the CPU get even more confused while it's copying data from system RAM to VRAM. And not only that, it's more consistent, and that means it's more enjoyable. Outside of these two differences, if I had to choose between the versions, I would certainly choose this particular version on my particular rig, in this case the i5 and the 970. Outside of that, I would choose either or of the Xbox One or the PS4 versions, because they pretty much run identical now at 900p. I would then choose an AMD rig. Now I haven't run this on any other higher powered AMD machines. I would imagine if you're running it on a 280 or 290, then you'll probably get near enough the performance I'm getting here on my 970. It definitely needs far more power than what is running on the 7870 and 8350. In its current condition, there is absolutely no way this game is maximising either of these machines, including the consoles. It literally is, as clear as day, a game that was not finished and needed more time in the oven. There's been many games this generation, or this last year, that have come out that have been an absolute shambles of a launch, and AC Unity is certainly up there. Now as it stands at the moment, the average frame rate for my AMD machine running on these settings, which is low textures and then everything else pretty much the same as console aside the much better resolution, at an average of 25 frames per second with a low of 10 FPS. If I run it at 900p, it averages at 27. This is low textures. On my 970 machine, I'm getting around 45 to 48 frames per second if I run it on high at 1080p, and that's with FXAA on, and obviously soft shadows and HBAO plus, which is quicker than SSAO on an Nvidia card anyway, so it's always the one to use. Outside of this, you can obviously go for the option of MSAA, and that will take off about 5 FPS. The further up the scale you go, 4 or 8 on this machine is going to get you 30 and just dipping under. And the 1080 image is preferential over the blurred version on the consoles, even though it removes the jaggers. That 900p FXAA solution that's heavily blurred is a bit of a downer when you look at it against the 1080p crisp version on PC. That is definitely a benefit on the PC, probably the best one of all. Obviously I don't like tearing as well, so I put VSync on, or at least I use borderless Windows, which gives me a free VSync option, and it's much better condition now than it was when it launched, but it was always better on this machine than my AMD rig, and hopefully they'll fix all of these issues and bugs and quirks in the launch for AC Victory this year on PC as well as console. Now, I won't hold my breath for where that version falls out and how rushed they get it out, but I'm hoping they learn their lesson from the quality of this game. Even the Nvidia card isn't free of these issues, with having a weird issue with a small wavering effect on textures, which you can see on rooftops and floors as you walk slowly. You can see the example here that I mean. It's very minor, but again, it's little things like this that just bug you, along with the hard drive issues and the syncing with network data that can cause the game to pause for milliseconds, and this affects all versions to a lesser or greater degree. My final verdict, as it's too late now to do a review unless you guys really want me to, is the game is a letdown on two sides. Yes, the technical side of it is definitely a letdown, as we all know, in terms of how it performs, but also the story. The voiceover work, the real-time rendered scenes, and the actual story narrative is very well put together and of very high quality. The issue is it feels like it's been rushed and just finished off because they ran out of time to fill in all of their ideas and aspirations in the game. This is borne out by the amount of movie sequences in the game that are encoded at 60 FPS, but are actually 30 ones run offline. The lack of development schedule and the fact that it feels so unfinished in so many areas is a letdown, because overall it's a very good step forward in the Assassin's Creed franchise. But if they do not learn from these lessons, it could very well be the penultimate episode of the Assassin's Creed franchise, because no one's going to want to buy a broken game like this, and the sales have certainly been just as bad as I expected. Let's hope it follows suit, like I say, of AC2, of improving on its forefathers' errors and making the best game of the franchise. Unlike the game's premise, it is certainly an evolution rather than a revolution. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, then please hit the like and sub button. It really helps me immensely. I shall be doing many more of my final verdict on games, because as we know, games don't always end now after they are launched. So just like my update review of Drive Club, I tend to do updates. I've got one coming for Far Cry 4, which I'll cover both console and PC at the same time. But to give you guys just a little treat of what you can expect in that, the God Rays have returned on the PS4 and arrived to Microsoft's machine. Yep, what you're seeing before you is the Xbox One version of Far Cry 4, now sporting God Rays just like it does on PC and PS4. The plot thickens, but look out for my final analysis and my final verdict after all of the patches have been released, so you guys can find out which one is best, if all of the issues have been resolved, how solid is performance across console and PC, and if you're still thinking of picking this up now in a cheaper bargain, is it worth picking up? Please be sure to leave your comments below. I'll leave you with an heroic and fitting ending for Arno. You guys and girls game hard, and I'll see you soon on the next one.
No, you don't!